This is Akashvani. Time for a weekly program, Our Guest. I hand over the mic to the show host, Nitish Arora, for the same.
उस मुल्क की सरहद को कोई छू नहीं सकता जिस मुल्क की सरहद की निगहबानों आंखें. वैसे ये बीएसएफ के लिए, like this is as true for army, and if the nation is prepared, if the army is prepared, the nation is secured. In our guest today, because occasion is Army Day, I have in my studios senior defense correspondent Mayank Singh, somebody who can delve into the past, into the present, and also look into the future, because he's been covering army almost for 2 decades. Mayank ji, welcome to the studios.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure, sir.
You've been watching Indian Army since long, and you have seen the kind of challenges that our nation faces and how prepared our army is. That has got to be the first question.
The immediate answer, short answer is that the kind of training and the kind of motivation our forces have, the people have, it is always prepared for any kind of contingency and crisis. Then comes that with amount of finances, because as we got independence, there was a finite budget which had to be accordingly allotted to the people, to the nation, to the societal growth, to the country's growth, and to the multifarious aspects so that country grows. In that came as one part the armed forces also, and army was one of it. So as the country grew and development took place, economy grew, the budget was increased. Accordingly, it was equipped. And initially the number of people while we got independence was very high, which was brought down. But then gradually it was also scaled up because 1962 war took place and we had lots of lessons to learn after that. And gradually it was increased. Today we have almost 1.2 million army, which is looked after, and it has to be equipped also, because with motivation and with the kind of training, it is actually we fight the wars. And for what wars? We keep enemy in our mind. What kind of profile of weapons it has, equipment it has. Do we match that equipment and profile? Accordingly, we allot the budget. So we are well prepared, and we keep analyzing the threats as well as the induction profile of the enemy also, and the challenges. Accordingly, we modernize, we remove the obsolete weaponry, and also in terms of training also. And you'll be very happy to know that entire organizational aspect has been looked into. It is being reformed. Talking in short, army as an organization is also changing its fighting formations, like brigades, like divisions and all. They are also undergoing short changes. Larger aspect, we are going for theaterization, and which is being worked out.
Which means that we are in sync with the changing times, and which is quite required also. You said in your answer a few things about profile and about equipment, about motivation. Well, my next question is on this only. In the last decade or so, we are now more into having indigenous equipment, be it Air Force, be it Navy, and be it Armed Forces, which is a very welcome change. How the army men to the Jawan level have taken to this change that the nation has now embarked upon?
So it's a very important aspect which is being looked into and focused upon, because you don't fight wars with borrowed weaponry and technology. So it is a very critical area on which we are now focusing. As you said, all three services, which is Army, Navy and Air Force, we'll be very happy to know that it was in 1965 that Indian Navy had sowed a seed called Department of Naval Design. So today, the maximum amount of indigenization has taken place into the warship construction, to the extent that we have already constructed aircraft carrier. Coming to the changes, because it is going to be indigenous change, armed forces are meant, as a machinery, are meant to handle crisis. And the crisis, as we see, is called war, which decides the national security. In that regard, whatever steps army takes, it is very deliberate and slow, so that it is always in sync with the men. And men should be at ease. There should not be any ambiguity when it comes to war and clarity of command. So any induction which takes place is done very deliberately in a very planned manner. It is being taken into, and as I said, it is being done in a very deliberate manner.
The Josh is high.
It's very high.
So in the air we have Tejas. In the oceans, you said we have our own indigenous carriers, and we are also developing guns and almost like on all three accounts. But the another thing which is very important is space. Indian Army is coordinating with the ISRO and developing a space system also. what kind of system we are having in place in space, because next generation war is not only going to be on air or on the grounds or on the seas, but it has to be like extraterrestrial space wars as well.
It is a very pertinent point you have brought out. 99 Kargil war, we had faced lots of problem because navigational aspects, they were not in our hands. We were borrowing navigational information from somebody else, from outside. It was then that we realized we need to have our own constellation of satellites which should be guiding not only in terms of GPS positions, but it should be guiding, navigating our warships, our missiles also to that extent. So you brought out a very important point. We are working on space as a very important focus, and Air Force is the lead agency into that. We have already created a division level strength into it with the Air Force in command, and we are working on it. As you see, ISRO in sync with the armed forces is developing. Anti-satellite weapons is also one of the aspects which we have already tested. It was shown that we have already got the capability in case required. But we have always said that it is a peace area. We should not be waging war into space. So that is an aspect, but we have been sensitive towards it. Our space program is also going quite well. And economically, that people who have been using lots of money, finances for that, we have done that same work, qualitative work, within a limited means and resources.
Earlier, we felt that army, though, was working for the nation and for the civilians, but they were on a secluded island. But now the civil defense partnership, that is an area which has come up very strong. What is your intake on that?
15th January Army Day has this very same philosophy that now we should be taking out these kind of programs, which is Army Day programs, to the areas wherein people should be getting to know it. It is under that thought process that now all the raising days are being celebrated out of Delhi. So that's what the point is actually.
So that's Delhi's loss since last year. It has moved out of Delhi. Where is it this time?
It is in Lucknow. There is a Gurkha Regimental Center there. In that, the program is to be held. But they have, in that program also, it has been multi-layered ways. It's a huge program actually.
So, which means there is a change in profile of the army, and which is happening slowly, gradually, but certainly. So, how do we look into the future now?
Futures, as we said, it is as per the perception, as per the analysis of threat profiles. So we can say that it's a very live, organic organization which keeps in mind the growth, the present resources, and the future requirements. Future requirements can be said into like niche technology, which is artificial intelligence, machine learning, things like that. So Army has started amalgamating the old weaponry in such a way. And you had brought in an important point that how indigenization is profiles have taken place. And you had used a term called gun. Actually, that's right. Because we talked about only the warships. In terms of army, let's say very strategic and area weapon, which hits at a long distance and in a larger area is called gun. Artillery uses that. In that regard, we have become a lot, almost we are going to be totally dependent on construction of equipment within India itself.
Self-dependent. DRDO is also playing a big role. DRDO.
Very important role, you said right. In terms of aviation, we have got Tejas which is Mark 1, Tejas Mark 1A. And we have good that one of the weakest area had been engines. Because technology is very high, metallurgy is very niche and very important. In that regard, we have got some certain agreements, which is with the Safran in France. And also we are going to buy engines from America, which is GE engines.
But then there is technology transfer clause also, because now we are going to buy, but sooner or later we are going to produce it myself.
You are correct. With time, as we see, maturity of technology is taking place, that the same aircraft which used to carry 1 ton can now carry almost 18 tons, which is, I'm talking about Sukhois. Keeping that in mind, GE engine is going to be good because that will bring technology with it. But as I said, maturity of technology evolves. So we have to also further evolve away and ahead of the technology which we are going to buy. So in that regard also lots of R&D is taking place. Keeping that specifically in mind, the budget, it has started increasing the envelope of allotment or budget allocation in that regard also.
But the role of Indian Army is also going beyond our borders now, because India is a global player on many counts now. And defense is also one. So a lot of strategic grouping with other nations is also taking place. And I think we are the largest contributor in peacekeeping forces of United Nations. A point on that.
India has always believed into law-based international order. And UN is one of the organizations which India has always kept in mind when placing its services in training also, in bilateral exercises also, in multilateral exercises, UN exercises also. Everything compatible to the UN requirement is looked into. So you said right, India has always been looking, whenever it plans something or it does something strategically, it is ethics and morality and law-based orders, which it keeps into mind. So keeping that in mind, yes, training, we are holding, army itself is holding strategic exercises, multilateral exercises, bilateral exercises, which can be including with America, Russia, France, Japan, and all other nations which are important for us. We have been doing. UN, you said, we are basing troops all across the country, world, wherever it is needed. Also, in terms of exchange programs, training programs, our training academies train people from other nations, friendly nations, neighborhood. Also, a very important aspect which is being focused since last 2 years is defense attaches. Since India has become a producer also, within indigenous production has risen high, we have brought in an additional role to the defense attaches who will be talking about our Indian weaponry to the other nations wherever they are based at. Also, they keep an eye on the profiles which host country may need. So that has become a role. It is all about the way you said India Army is playing a very strategic role in
That's a
terms
very
of.
beautiful point that you have brought in. Actually, we are now into defense exports also. And that's why we are having defense expos in many nations within India and outside India also. So tell us something about, as a parting shot, about how is this defense export has added to India's profile and the profile of the Indian Army?
Dependency, as I said, you can't be fighting war with the borrowed weaponry and technology. It is a very good example that we are evolving. Indigenous construction is growing, manufacturing is increasing, along with not only DPSUs, along with the private players who have come up. So it is increasing. Almost 18,000 crores was the last year's export we had done, which was a record and high in last, whenever we started exporting that. Very important thing is that Tejas is something which is being looked into. People are giving their inquiries about it. We have already exported BrahMos, which is uncomparable, very unbeatable kind of a missile we have. Radars, we are creating very good, important radars, very powerful radars, which are also being looked. People are showing interest into it.
And defense production has also gone into private sector as well, which is a big leap, in fact, in our thought process of the country.
In defense procurement policy, lots of changes were made, keeping in mind the indigenous defense manufacturing, that too done by the private players. In terms of budgetary allocations, a separate budget to the extent of almost 75% was separated so that anything which is being inducted or procured should be produced by the indigenous manufacturers.
Which means the army is shedding a lot of mass and is becoming lean, mean, and thin. It always was.
You said a very sensitive and important point in a very lighter note. Actually, in a lighter way, you are right. Because the plan is actually to bring down the number of personnel so that money which will be saved can be used towards capital procurements and towards modernization of the armed forces. Indigenous production is also one aspect of it actually. Because being indigenously produced, the costing will be down. So we'll be procuring better weapons and lesser cost. So that will also help.
So what is the underlying statement by a senior defense correspondent when we wrap up today's our guest?
Fighting Indian wars with Indian weapons is one of the most important point, and we are coming up very well into it. Our armed forces are playing and are looking into it. They are now a part of that manufacturing which is taking place. That's going to play an important role, and it will help us in the coming decades in so important way.
And the Josh is
very high.
hi, sir. Mayank ji, thank you so much for being our guest today. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, and thank you so much for calling me here.
You were listening to the weekly program Our Guest that is broadcast every Monday at 9:15 a.m. Have a nice day.